after yet another wave of mass shootings, a demand for action.
There are too many other schools, too many other everyday places that have become killing fields, battlefields here in America.
Most Americans agree, but will anything change? Now, on The Inside Story, America and Guns.
Hi, I'm Anita Pell, WEWE White House correspondent. President Joe Biden is challenging the United States Congress to pass legislation to try to reduce the number of mass shootings in this country. That number is around 250 since the beginning of the year. Most notably, May 14th, when an 18-year-old man targeted Black people in a supermarket in Buffalo, New York, killing 10 and wounding 3 others. 10 days later, on May 24th, an 18-year-old man took an assault rifle into an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, killing 19 children and 2 teachers. Gun ownership in America is allowed under the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which simply reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We will go deeper into the Second Amendment and the way courts have interpreted it in a few minutes. But first, to Uvalde, Texas, and how the community is dealing with overwhelming grief and sorrow. WEWE's Mike O'Sullivan was there.
In this town of barely 16,000 residents, nearly everyone has a connection to Robb Elementary School or one of the victims. This woman knows the families of some of the slain and injured children. Another woman's son, Fernando Rodriguez, is a student in 4th grade at Robb Elementary School. He was in the school when the shooter arrived, but escaped with teachers and other students through a window. Friends in another classroom were among those who died. This woman's great-granddaughter, Monique Alvarez, was among the children who escaped from the school and survived. The woman's brother, Manny Alvarez, asks why the teenage gunman could buy weapons so easily.
When they get 18, they can go and buy rifles and all kinds of ammunition and everything. I mean, I don't think that's right.
And what do you think can be done to stop these shootings?
The guns. That's what I think, the guns.
There are too many high-powered guns, Maria Alvarez says. This Nigerian immigrant drove here from his home in Austin, Texas, to pay his respects. He survived a mass spree shooting by a gunman in Midland and Odessa, Texas in 2019. Shot 3 times, he was lucky to survive. 7 others did not.
So it's sad news when I heard this. The past 2 days, 3 days, I couldn't sleep. Decided to come over and pay my last, show some love.
He blames politicians for not protecting the children.
So it's so sad. Their blood is in the leader's hand.
A grieving community asking why these young lives were cut short. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Uvalde, Texas.
Putting limits on gun ownership has been a hotly contested political issue for decades. Mass shootings like we saw in Buffalo and Uvalde moved many to call for stricter gun laws. But little gets done, due mostly to the enormous amounts of money gun rights groups spend to lobby Congress. On June 2nd, President Biden demanded that Congress do something.
According to new data just released by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, guns are the #1 killer of children in the United States of America. The #1 killer. More than car accidents, more than cancer. For God's sake, how much more carnage are we willing to accept? How many more innocent American lives must be taken before we say enough, enough? We spent hours with hundreds of family members who were broken, whose lives will never be the same. They had one message for all of us: do something. Just do something. For God's sake, do something. After Columbine, after Sandy Hook, after Charleston, after Orlando, after Las Vegas, after Parkland, nothing has been done. This time that can't be true. This time we must actually do something. Enough. It's time for each of us to do our part. It's time to act for the children we've lost, for the children we can save, for the nation we love. Let's hear the call and the cry. Let's meet the moment. Let us finally do something.
2 weeks after 19 children and 2 teachers were killed in a mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas, U.S. lawmakers heard from parents of the victims.
I left my daughter at that school, and that decision will haunt me for the rest of my life.
And from a survivor inside the school.
He shot my friend that was next to me, and I thought he was going to come back to the room, so I grabbed the blood and put it all over me.
House Democrats rallied at a memorial for gun violence victims earlier this week before narrowly passing a package of gun control measures.
In 2019, the United States suffered 17 times more gun deaths than the next highest G7 country. We stand alone in mass shootings. Other countries pass sensible gun safety laws and protect their children. And no other country comes close to the number of school shootings we have.
But supporters of the constitutional right to bear arms argue that the commonly proposed gun control laws, such as limits on gun magazines, would not make a difference.
Magazines are commonly possessed by law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes. The few rigorous studies on their prohibition have found that the evidence for their success at lowering rates of gun violence is inconclusive at best. The context in which mass public shootings occur renders magazine limits effectively useless at saving lives.
Gun control is one of the impassioned debates in American life. Polls show the majority of Americans support most of these measures, but Republican lawmakers argue that boosting school security and gun safety education will save more lives.
There's an important place for law-abiding gun owners to serve in protecting themselves, their families, and their communities from violence. Our Second Amendment is an important tool in securing our individual rights to self-defense.
With narrow control of the U.S. Senate, Democrats will have to reach a deal with Republicans, who strongly support the National Rifle Association and other gun rights groups, to pass those changes into law.
It's an overwhelming consensus in this caucus, among the broad panoply of gun groups, gun safety groups, and among the American people. Get something done, get something real done, even if it's not everything that many of us would wish for.
That possible deal in the Senate could include raising from 18 to 21 the minimum age to own an AR-15 style assault rifle, the same weapon that was used by the 18-year-old gunman in Uvalde, Texas. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington. Lawmakers from both political parties are trying to work out bipartisan legislation that address some of the issues that President Biden laid out in his speech. But the timetable for a vote is still unclear. There's a lot of pressure on members of Congress to not vote for any new gun laws. That pressure comes mostly from the National Rifle Association, a nonprofit organization that represents gun makers and owners. WEWE's Arash Arabasadi explains what the NRA is and does.
America's most recent wave of gun violence started in May with a hate-fueled shooting rampage in a grocery store in a part of Buffalo, New York, known to have a large black population. 10 people died. Just days later, a horrific school shooting where 19 young children and 2 teachers fell victim to a gunman at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. And just days after that, a gunman who blamed his surgeon for ongoing pain following a procedure shot up a hospital in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The surgeon, Dr. Preston Phillips, and 3 others died.
I am a firearm owner and third-generation police officer, and I can tell you, as a matter of public safety, the unfettered availability of weapons of war in the United States is not only a significant and one of the most significant public safety issues in the country, it is now a national security issue because we're seeing these young teenage terrorists getting a hold of these weapons of war as well.
The tie binding all 3 shootings and many others is the AR-15 style rifle. The weapon has been at the heart of America's gun debate. It was banned under the 1994 federal assault weapons ban, which expired in 2004. Since then, the National Rifle Association has fought fiercely to protect the right to own it. The NRA is a powerful gun lobby. It collects dues from its more than 5 million members and makes donations directly to political candidates and political action committees, including its own NRA Victory Fund, to try to wield influence.
It's time to restore the American precept that each individual is accountable for his actions. And that's why we, the NRA, will never ever stop fighting for the right of the innocent and the law-abiding to defend themselves against the evil criminal element that plagues our society.
The NRA, or National Rifle Association, is a long-standing political lobbying organization that represents not only gun owners, but the gun industry, and initially was much more concerned about things like gun safety and training people and making these kinds of opportunities available for the average gun owner.
Congressional support for the NRA runs deepest among Republicans.
For millions of Americans, the right to keep and bear arms is not theoretical, it's not abstract. For a single mom in a dangerous neighborhood, it is a matter of basic security. Taking guns away from these responsible Americans will not make them safer, nor will it make our nation more secure.
Over time, says Levin, the NRA began appealing to Americans' fears through what he describes as successful propaganda that reinforces popular myths.
A certain warrior view of what it is to be an American, particularly tied around machismo or male dominance and the notion of men protecting their families from whatever outside forces are coming at our homes.
Levin says legendary actor and 5-time NRA President Charlton Heston embodied that tough guy image in films like 1968's Planet of the Apes. Heston also portrayed Ben-Hur and Moses, but arguably his most impactful role was with the NRA, where he popularized the phrase,
"From my cold, 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 dead hands. From my cold, dead hands."
Charlton Heston would say, "From my cold, dead hands." In other words, you'll have to kill me to take the gun first.
a rallying cry to gun owners to never lay down their arms in pursuit of personal liberty. But even the NRA's Heston could laugh at the issue he held dear. Here he is in 1993 appearing on the American late-night satire show Saturday Night Live.
This week, President Bill Clinton signed into law the Brady Bill, mandating a 5-day waiting period for the purchase of a simple handgun. The only problem is, while you're waiting for your gun, the criminals are stealing theirs and running amok. That's why the National Rifle Association is proud to introduce our answer to those Brady Bill blues, the NRA 5-day loaner.
In short, the joke mocks legislation by exposing legal workarounds or loopholes, but Levin says it's important to remember how this mega machine in American politics came to be.
The NRA became powerful by becoming a well-financed lobbying group that intertwined with politicians who wanted to be reelected and were able to find that fear is the lowest common denominator with respect to public policy. And if you can get people scared, you can sell guns and sell candidates who protect the right to any gun at any time.
You know, you might be able to own a gun and have it in your home.
Despite internally facing charges of fraud and the failure of its TV network, the NRA says Levin remains a powerhouse in American politics. So long as the National Rifle Association holds influence with politicians, Levin says don't expect much to change on the national level. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
Mass shootings like the one in Uvalde draw enormous attention, and rightly so. But less visible is an alarming rate of day-to-day gun deaths of children 14 and younger. VOA's Veronica Balderas Iglesias has more on this growing crisis.
My grandson took 2 shots. He got shot in his chest up close and personal, and he got shot in his head, executional style.
Malachi Jackson, gunned down in Washington, D.C. last month, was only 15 years old. His grandmother said a suspect is in custody and a criminal investigation is ongoing.
It started with two children having a fight, having some words with each other. In Washington, D.C., these kids have guns just like they have ice cream. It shouldn't be that easy for a child to get a gun.
For the sake of her safety, the grandmother asked to wear a face mask on camera. Jackson is one of 500 teenagers killed this year with firearms, according to the Gun Violence Archive, which tracks gun deaths using public records. Some of these deaths are homicides, others are accidental.
The teens that are 12 and up, or 10 and up, 11 and up, that can be gang activity. That can be all sorts of stuff. Children under 10, when they die by gun, they have found their father's gun, which is not properly stowed. They play with those guns and they don't understand that there's no reset button.
The mass shootings this month in Uvalde, Texas and Buffalo, New York have shocked the world. But day-to-day gun violence, one-off shootings like Jackson's, is an epidemic, researchers say. Firearms deaths among young people increased nearly 30% in 2020. Gun violence kills more children per capita than car crashes, drug overdoses, and even cancer, according to researchers from the University of Michigan.
Sometimes it's accessibility to firearms that are not their own. And sometimes it's bullying that occurs in school. Nearly 60% of all firearm deaths are actually suicides. And most of those happen in rural areas.
With the COVID-19 pandemic still around, mood disorders like anxiety and depression on the rise, and ready access to guns in many U.S. states, experts say it's easy to see what's driving the numbers.
Anxiety disorder is the most common diagnosis out there, particularly when there's substance use mixed in. We're finding behaviors and a self-destruction and a destruction of others at a level we have never seen.
Malachi Jackson's grandmother and his family are still grieving and want politicians to keep guns out of the hands of children.
There's dying on our streets every single day, 2 and 3 kids a day. We are in an outrage. We are sad. We are confused. We need harder laws.
The National Rifle Association, which for years pushed looser gun laws, didn't reply to our interview request. Veronica Valderas Iglesias for VOA News, Washington.
Before we go, perhaps the most famous son of Uvalde came here recently. Actor Matthew McConaughey stopped by the White House press briefing on June 7th, after briefly meeting with President Biden. He talked about spending the past days back in Uvalde and pressed lawmakers to act.
Uvalde, Texas is where I was born. It's where my mom taught kindergarten less than a mile from Robb Elementary. And that is there that we met 2 of the grieving parents, Ryan and Jessica Ramirez. Their 10-year-old daughter, Alethea. She was one of the 19 children that were killed the day before. Now, Alethea, her dream was to go to art school in Paris and one day share her art with the world. Now, this particular drawing is a self-portrait, all right, of Alethea drawing with her friend in heaven looking down on her, drawing the very same picture. Her mother said of this drawing, she said, you know, we never really talked to her about heaven before, but somehow she knew. Alethea was 10 years old. We also met Anna and Danilo, the mom and the stepdad of 9-year-old Maite Rodriguez. Now, Maite wanted to be a marine biologist. Maite wore green high-top Converse with a heart she had hand-drawn on the right toe because they represented her love of nature. Camilla's got these shoes. Can you show these shoes, please? Wore these every day. Green Converse with a heart on the right toe. These are the same green Converse on her feet that turned out to be the only clear evidence that could identify her after the shooting. How about that? Look, we heard from so many people, right? Families of the deceased, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, Texas Rangers, hunters, Border Patrol, and responsible gun owners who won't give up their Second Amendment right to bear arms. And you know what they all said? We want secure and safe schools, and we want gun laws that won't make it so easy for the bad guys to get these damn guns. Let's start giving all of us good reason to believe that the American dream is not an illusion. We start by making laws that save innocent lives and don't infringe on our Second Amendment rights. We start right now by voting to pass policies that can keep us from having as many Columbine, Sandy Hooks, Parklands, Las Vegases, Buffaloes, and Uvaldes from here on. We start by making the loss of these lives matter.
We will keep watch on what happens next and follow up in the weeks ahead. Follow me on Twitter at 6ArmsPowell. Stay up to date by following VOA News on Instagram and Facebook, and visit voanews.com for in-depth reporting. Thanks for watching. I'm Anita Powell. See you next week for the Inside Story.